Captain Jake Morrison stared out at the massive space station floating in the darkness ahead. Nexus Prime looked like a giant metal flower with 12 petals, each section belonging to a different alien race. His ship, Terra's Hope, felt tiny compared to the enormous structure that housed the Galactic Council. "First time seeing aliens up close, Captain?" asked Dr. Lisa Carter, the mission's expert on alien minds. She stood beside him on the bridge, watching the station grow larger on their screens. "First time for all of us," Jake replied. His hands were steady on the controls, but inside his heart was racing. This meeting would decide humanity's future among the stars. Ambassador Peter Hayes joined them at the window. He wore his best diplomatic uniform, but even he looked nervous. "Remember, everyone stays calm no matter what they say to us. We're here to make friends, not enemies." The communication system crackled to life. A cold, mechanical voice spoke in perfect English. "Human vessel, you are cleared to dock at Section 7. Prepare for immediate psychological evaluation upon arrival." Jake guided their ship into the docking bay. The artificial gravity felt strange under their feet as they walked through the airlock. The corridor beyond was huge, built for creatures, much larger than humans. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing with soft blue light. Their first sight of an alien was shocking. The creature stood 10 feet tall, made entirely of what looked like living crystal. Its body caught the light and threw rainbows across the metal floor. It had no face that humans could recognize, just a smooth crystal surface with 2 glowing points that might have been eyes. "I am Ambassador Kethran of the Veltar," the creature said. Its voice came from somewhere inside its crystal body, sounding like wind chimes in a storm. "You will follow me to the evaluation chamber." The humans walked behind the crystal alien through corridors filled with other strange beings. Jake saw creatures that looked like giant insects with too many legs, floating jellyfish made of pure energy, and things he couldn't even begin to describe. All of them stopped to stare at the human visitors with what seemed like curiosity mixed with disgust. The evaluation chamber was a large white room with no furniture except for 5 chairs clearly made for humans. Above them, a gallery filled with alien observers looked down like they were watching animals in a zoo. Jake counted representatives from all 12 council races. "Please be seated," said another alien, this one resembling a praying mantis the size of a small car. "I am Commander Zithak of the Zephyrians. We will now begin your species evaluation." Dr. Carter whispered to Jake, "They're treating this like a science experiment. Look at how they're watching us." The aliens began their tests immediately. They showed the humans images designed to provoke emotional responses. Pictures of destruction, loss, joy, and triumph flashed on screens around the room. The humans reacted, naturally, their faces showing the emotions they felt. Some smiled at beautiful scenes, others frowned at images of suffering. In the gallery above, the aliens took notes and spoke to each other in clicking, buzzing languages. Their own faces, when they had faces at all, showed no emotion whatsoever. They observed human feelings like scientists studying bacteria under a microscope. "Fascinating," said Kethran, his crystal body flashing different colors. "Look how their facial muscles change based on the visual stimuli. Their heart rates increase and decrease. Even their skin temperature changes." "Completely irrational," clicked Commander Zithak. "They cannot control these responses. How do they make logical decisions when their minds are clouded by these primitive reactions?" The test continued for hours. The aliens had the humans solve puzzles while showing them disturbing images. They played sounds that made the humans sad or angry and measured their responses. They even brought in human volunteers who had arrived earlier, people who broke down crying when shown pictures of their families back on Earth. Ambassador Hayes stood up during a break in the testing. "With respect, honored council members, these evaluations seem designed to provoke emotional responses. Humans use emotions as tools to better understand our world and each other." A new voice spoke from the gallery, deep and rumbling like an earthquake. It belonged to a creature that looked like a living mountain of black stone. "Emotions are weaknesses, human. They cloud judgment. They lead to poor decisions. They cause wars and destruction. But they also inspire us to create beautiful art, to love our families, to sacrifice ourselves for others, Lisa Carter said, standing beside the ambassador. The crystal alien Catherine flashed brighter. Love, sacrifice, art. These are illusions your primitive brains create to justify irrational behavior. Advanced species have evolved beyond such limitations, the mountain creature rumbled again. We have observed your species' history. Wars, fought over emotions, millions dead because of anger, hatred, jealousy. Your emotions make you dangerous and unpredictable. Jake felt anger rising in his chest but forced himself to stay calm. He could see what the aliens were doing. They were judging humanity based on their worst moments while ignoring their greatest achievements. The testing resumed, becoming more intense. The aliens showed the humans recordings of disasters from Earth's history, measuring how they reacted to seeing their own species suffer. They played sounds of crying children and watched the humans' faces crumple with sympathy. They showed images of beauty and wonder, studying how the humans' eyes lit up with joy. After 6 hours of evaluation, the council gathered to discuss their findings. The humans sat in their chairs, exhausted and feeling like specimens in a lab. Catherine returned to address them. The Galactic Council has reached a decision regarding your species' application for membership. The room fell silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Humans are clearly an intelligent species with advanced technology, the crystal alien continued. However, your emotional instability makes you unsuitable for full galactic citizenship. You are slaves to your feelings, unable to make rational decisions when those feelings are involved. Ambassador Hayes opened his mouth to protest, but Catherine held up a crystal hand. However, the Council recognizes that you may have potential, if properly guided. We offer humanity conditional membership as a protected species. You will be placed under the guidance of more evolved races who will help you learn to control your emotional responses. What does that mean exactly? Hayes asked, though Jake could tell from his voice that he already knew the answer wouldn't be good. It means humans will live in designated areas under Council supervision. Your activities will be monitored and controlled for the safety of other species. You will receive education in logical thinking and emotional suppression. In time, perhaps, your species can evolve beyond its current limitations. Jake felt his hands clench into fists. They were being treated like children, or worse, like dangerous animals that needed to be caged. But he also knew they had no choice. Humanity needed access to galactic technology and trade routes to survive. Ambassador Hayes took a deep breath. The human delegation accepts the Council's generous offer. As they prepared to leave, Jake caught Dr. Carter's eye. She gave him the smallest nod. She understood, just as he did, that this was only the beginning. The aliens might think they had defeated humanity with their cold logic, but they had just made a serious mistake. They had underestimated what humans could do when they were angry. 3 years had passed since humanity accepted their place as a protected species under the Galactic Council. Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez walked through the corridors of the research vessel, Logical Pursuit, trying to ignore the stares from her alien crewmates. Even after all this time, they still looked at her like she was a wild animal that might bite. The ship was a joint project between humans and the Veltar crystal beings. Amy was one of only 12 humans aboard, outnumbered by 60 alien researchers, who spent their days studying human behavior like she was some kind of lab rat. Subject Rodriguez called out Dr. Thekmar, a Veltar scientist whose crystal body glowed pale green. Report to Testing Bay 3 for your daily emotional evaluation. Amy gritted her teeth but obeyed. She had learned not to argue with the aliens. Arguments were seen as proof of human emotional instability, which only made things worse for her and the other human test subjects. The testing bay looked like a medical examination room crossed with a prison cell. White walls, bright lights, and cameras recording everything. Amy sat in the single human-sized chair while alien observers filled the viewing area above. Today we will test your response to simulated loss, announced Dr. Thekmar. The room's screens lit up with images Amy had seen dozens of times before. Pictures of her family back on Earth, her childhood home, her pet dog from when she was 10 years old. Then the images changed. The screens showed her hometown burning, her family crying, her dog lying motionless. None of it was real, but Amy's heart still raced. Tears formed in her eyes, despite knowing it was all fake. "Observe how the subject's pupils dilate," Dr. Thekmar noted to his colleagues. "Heart rate increases by 37%. Stress hormone levels rising. The human cannot control these responses even when she knows the stimuli are artificial." Amy wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Anyone would be upset seeing images like that, even fake ones. It's called empathy." "Empathy is a flaw," replied another Veltar scientist. "It causes unnecessary suffering over events that do not directly affect survival. Your species wastes enormous mental energy on feelings about situations you cannot change." The testing continued for 2 hours. They showed Amy images designed to make her angry, sad, happy, and afraid. They measured every physical response her body made. The aliens took notes and discussed her reactions as if she wasn't even there. When it was finally over, Amy returned to her small quarters in the human section of the ship. The 12 humans lived in what was basically a zoo exhibit, comfortable but completely separated from the rest of the crew. Their every move was monitored, their conversations recorded, their privacy non-existent. She found her roommate, Dr. Susan Walsh, sitting at their tiny desk reading reports on her tablet. Susan was a psychologist who had volunteered for this assignment, specifically to learn about alien minds. "How bad was it today?" Susan asked without looking up from her reading. "Same as always," Amy replied, flopping down on her narrow bed. "They poked and prodded and measured every twitch. I swear they're getting worse, not better. Yesterday they made poor Kevin watch videos of his dead mother for 3 straight hours, just to see how long he would cry." Susan finally looked up. "That's because they're not trying to help us. They're trying to understand us so they can control us better." Amy sat up. "What do you mean?" "I've been analyzing their research methods," Susan whispered, glancing at the cameras in the corners of their room. "They're not studying our emotions to help us manage them. They're mapping our psychological weaknesses. Every test is designed to find new ways to manipulate human behavior." "That's horrible," Amy said, but she wasn't really surprised. She had suspected something like this for months. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Dr. Marcus Webb worked in his hidden laboratory beneath the ruins of the old Chicago University. The surface was now part of a human reservation, one of dozens of areas where humans were allowed to live under alien supervision. But deep underground, away from alien sensors, Webb and his team continued their secret research. "The psychological profiles are fascinating," Webb said to his assistant, Dr. Jennifer Stone, as they reviewed stolen alien data. "Look at this analysis of human emotional responses. They've cataloged every possible way to cause fear, anger, sadness, or joy in human subjects." Jennifer leaned over his shoulder to read the alien text, translated by their computer systems. "They're building a manual for controlling us. If they understand exactly what makes us feel certain emotions, they can use those emotions as weapons. But here's what's interesting," Webb said, pointing to another section of the alien data. "Look at their own psychological profiles. There's nothing there. No emotional responses recorded for any council species. It's like they're missing an entire section of their minds." "Maybe they evolved differently than we did," Jennifer suggested. Webb shook his head. "No, look at this." He pulled up historical records the humans had managed to piece together from various alien databases. Thousands of years ago, these species had emotional responses just like humans, but something changed. "Look at these genetic modification records." Jennifer's eyes widened as she read the data. "They surgically removed their own ability to feel emotions. Why would they do that?" "Because emotions caused wars," Webb explained. "The historical records show massive conflicts fought over love, hatred, jealousy, and fear. So their ancestors decided to solve the problem by removing emotions entirely from their species." "But if they had emotions once, then the brain structures might still be there," Jennifer realized. "Dormant, but intact." Webb smiled. "Exactly, and if those structures are still there, they might be reactivated under the right circumstances." He pulled up brain scans of various alien species that the humans had secretly obtained over the past 3 years. Look at these neural pathways. They're underdeveloped but present in every council species we've examined. It's like they have the capacity for emotion, but no experience with it whatsoever. That would make them incredibly vulnerable, Jennifer breathed. A species that has never felt fear wouldn't know how to cope with it if they suddenly experienced it. Which gives me an idea, Webb said. But we're going to need help from the inside. Back on the logical pursuit, Amy received an encrypted message hidden in her daily correspondence from Earth. The message was from her brother, but the real sender was Dr. Webb. It contained a simple request disguised as family news. Gather more detailed information about alien psychology and behavior. Amy began paying closer attention during her daily torture sessions. She noticed how the Veltar scientists never showed any reaction to the horrible images they showed humans. They didn't flinch at violence, didn't smile at beauty, didn't react to anything at all. Don't you ever feel anything when you watch these tests? Amy asked Dr. Thekmar one day. The crystal alien's body flickered with confusion. Feel? I do not understand the question. I observe and record data. Why would I experience any physical sensations? But don't you feel bad about making us suffer? Suffer is a human concept, Dr. Thekmar replied. You experience chemical reactions in your brain that you interpret as unpleasant. I do not have such reactions, therefore the concept has no meaning to me. Amy realized the alien wasn't being cruel on purpose. He literally could not understand what cruelty was. To him, causing pain to humans was no different from adjusting the temperature in a room. He had no emotional framework to understand what his actions meant. That night, Amy shared her observations with Susan. They're not evil, she whispered. They're empty. It's like talking to very smart computers that happen to have bodies. Which might be exactly what they are, Susan replied thoughtfully. If they removed all emotional capacity from their species, what's left? Pure logic and calculation, but no empathy, no compassion, no ability to understand why those things matter. So how do we fight against something like that? Amy asked. Susan smiled grimly. We remind them what they gave up. We show them what they lost when they decided emotions were weaknesses instead of strengths. As Amy fell asleep that night, she dreamed of home. But for the first time in 3 years, her dreams weren't filled with sadness about what she had lost. Instead, she dreamed about what humanity might gain if they could teach the aliens something about the power of human emotion. The aliens thought they had tamed humanity by studying their feelings. But they were about to learn that understanding emotions and controlling them were two very different things. And humans had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to use their emotions as tools for survival. The real test was just beginning. Dr. Marcus Webb's underground laboratory had grown considerably over the past year. What started as a small research team had become a network of human scientists, psychologists, and engineers spread across 3 continents. They called their secret project Mirror because they were reflecting the aliens' own research methods back at them. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the main laboratory, studying the holographic displays that showed brain scans of 12 different alien species. Each scan revealed the same thing: dormant neural pathways that once carried emotional responses, now lying unused in alien minds. The modifications were incredibly thorough, Webb explained, pointing to a Veltar brain scan. They didn't just suppress emotions, they surgically removed the chemical systems that produce them, but they left the underlying neural architecture intact. Why would they do that? Asked Dr. Jennifer Stone, who had become Webb's second in command. Because emotions weren't just random feelings, Webb replied. They served important functions. Fear helped avoid danger. Love built social bonds. Anger motivated defense of territory and family. Remove those systems entirely, and you get a species that can't properly assess threats or form meaningful relationships. Jake studied the brain scans more carefully. So they kept the hardware but removed the software. The question is, can we reinstall it? That's exactly what we've been working on, Webb said, pulling up another display. This one showed chemical formulas and neural stimulation patterns. We've identified the specific neurotransmitters and electrical signals that trigger emotional responses. In theory, we could artificially activate these dormant pathways. In theory, Jake repeated. What about in practice? Webb's expression grew serious. That's where it gets dangerous. These species haven't felt emotions for thousands of years. They have no psychological defenses, no coping mechanisms, no experience managing emotional responses. If we suddenly triggered fear or anger in an alien, the shock could be overwhelming. Good, Jake said grimly. They've been overwhelming us for 3 years. Jennifer looked concerned. Jake, we're talking about potentially driving sentient beings insane. That's not who we are, isn't it? Jake turned to face her. They've been torturing our people for years, treating us like lab animals, stripping away our dignity and freedom. At what point do we stop being nice and start fighting back? The debate was interrupted by an encrypted message from Amy Rodriguez aboard the Logical Pursuit. The communication came through a complex relay system that bounced signals off abandoned satellites to avoid alien detection. I have new information. Amy's voice came through the speakers, distorted by encryption, but still recognizable. The aliens are planning something big. They're talking about expanding their research program to include direct neural manipulation of human subjects. Webb felt his blood run cold. What kind of manipulation? They want to see if they can surgically suppress human emotions the same way their ancestors did to their own species. Dr. Theckamar thinks it would be a gift to humanity, freeing us from our emotional limitations. The laboratory fell silent. The idea of aliens forcibly removing human emotions was horrifying beyond words. How long do we have? Jake asked. The proposal goes before the full council in 6 months, Amy replied. If it passes, they'll start with voluntary subjects, then move to mandatory procedures for all humans in council space. Then we need to move now, Jake decided. Webb, how long would it take to implement your plan? The technical aspects are ready, Webb said, but we need a way to expose large numbers of aliens to the emotional stimuli simultaneously, and we need a situation dramatic enough to trigger genuine fear responses, not just mild anxiety. Dr. Jennifer Stone had been quiet during this exchange, but now she spoke up. What about a disaster simulation? Something that threatens the aliens directly but isn't actually dangerous to anyone? Webb nodded slowly. That could work. Fear is the most primal emotion, the one most likely to overwhelm their logical processes. If we could create a scenario where they believe they're about to die, the Nexus Prime Station, Jake said suddenly. It's the political center of the Galactic Council. If something threatened that station, every major alien leader would be involved in the response. Amy's voice crackled through the speakers again. I might be able to help with that. The Logical Pursuit is scheduled to dock at Nexus Prime next month for a council review of human research progress. I could plant your simulation devices during the visit. Too risky, Jake protested. If they catch you. They won't, Amy replied firmly. I've been their perfect test subject for 3 years. They think they understand human behavior completely. They won't suspect anything. Over the next several weeks, Webb's team worked around the clock to prepare their equipment. They designed small devices that could be hidden throughout Nexus Prime, each one capable of projecting realistic holographic dangers and simulating station systems failures. The key was making everything appear completely real to alien sensors while actually being harmless. Meanwhile, Amy began her most dangerous mission yet. Using her position aboard the Logical Pursuit, she studied the psychological profiles the aliens had compiled on their own species. What she discovered was both fascinating and disturbing. They've documented their own history extensively, Amy reported during one of her secret communications. The wars that led to their emotional modifications lasted for centuries. Billions died in conflicts driven by jealousy, hatred, and fear. But they also achieved incredible artistic and cultural achievements during that same period. The same emotions that caused destruction also inspired creation, Webb mused. They threw the baby out with the bathwater. There's more, Amy continued. I found records of the first aliens who underwent emotional removal surgery. Many of them reported feeling like they had lost something essential to their identity. Some even tried to reverse the procedure, but by then the technology to restore emotions had been lost. Jennifer Stone was taking notes as Amy spoke. So there might be aliens who would welcome the return of emotions, if they understood what they were missing. Maybe, Amy said. But right now, the council leadership sees emotions as pure weakness. They're convinced that removing them from humans would be doing us a favor. Jake made his decision. Then we need to show them what they really lost when they gave up emotions. Not just fear, but everything that makes life worth living. The plan that emerged was ambitious and dangerous. When the logical pursuit docked at Nexus Prime, Amy would plant Webb's devices throughout the station. During a formal council session reviewing human status, the devices would activate and create a simulation of catastrophic station failure. But the simulation wouldn't just be about fear. Webb's team had programmed multiple emotional triggers designed to awaken different dormant pathways in alien minds. The scenario would include elements designed to trigger protective instincts, compassion, and even wonder. The goal isn't just to scare them, Webb explained to his team. It's to show them the full spectrum of emotional experience. Fear will get their attention, but the other emotions will show them what they've been missing. As the logical pursuit prepared to depart for Nexus Prime, Amy received one final message from Jake Morrison. Remember, his voice said through the encrypted channel, you're not just representing yourself up there. You're representing all of humanity. The aliens think they understand us because they've studied our emotions like they're studying bacteria. But they don't understand that our emotions make us stronger, not weaker. Amy looked out at the stars through her small porthole window. In a few days, she would either help free humanity from alien control, or she would be discovered and face consequences too horrible to imagine. But for the first time in 3 years, she felt something other than despair. She felt hope and determination, and even a little excitement about what was to come. The aliens had taught her that emotions were weaknesses to be suppressed. But Amy had learned something they never understood. Emotions weren't something that happened to humans. They were tools that humans use to accomplish impossible things, and what they were about to attempt was definitely impossible, which made it exactly the kind of challenge that humans were built for. Amy Rodriguez felt her heart pounding as the logical pursuit approached Nexus Prime. Hidden in her personal belongings were 12 small devices, each no larger than a coin, designed by Dr. Webb's team to look like harmless human trinkets. The aliens had grown used to humans keeping sentimental objects, dismissing them as another sign of emotional weakness. Remember, Subject Rodriguez, Dr. Thekmar said as they prepared to dock. You will be presenting your species' progress to the full council. This is an honor few humans have received. Amy nodded respectfully, hiding her true thoughts. The honor was actually a trap. The aliens planned to use her presentation as evidence that humans could learn to suppress their emotions. Her measured, controlled responses over the past 3 years had convinced them that their training methods were working. They had no idea that Amy's calm behavior was part of a carefully planned deception. The docking process took several hours. Amy used the time to study the station's layout on her personal tablet, memorizing the locations where she would need to place Webb's devices. Each device needed to be positioned near major environmental systems to make the eventual simulation appear authentic. As they walked through Nexus Prime's corridors, Amy marveled at the station's size. Thousands of aliens from dozens of species moved through the halls, conducting the business of galactic government. None of them paid any attention to the small human following Dr. Thekmar to the presentation chambers. The first device went into a waste disposal unit near the main environmental controls. Amy pretended to throw away some trash while Dr. Thekmar examined alien artwork on the walls. The crystal being showed no interest in human waste management habits. The second device was placed near a communication relay station. Amy asked to use the restroom and slipped the device behind a panel while supposedly adjusting her hair in a mirror. The third went into a ventilation grate that she could reach by pretending to steady herself against the wall. Each placement made Amy's heart race faster, but she forced herself to maintain the calm, controlled demeanor the aliens expected from a properly trained human subject. The presentation chamber was enormous, with seating for representatives from all 12 council species. Amy had never seen so many different types of aliens in one place. Crystal beings like the Veltar, insect creatures like the Zephyrians, living stone entities, energy beings that flickered like flames, and others that defied easy description. At the center of it all sat the High Council, the most senior representatives of each species. They looked down at Amy like judges examining a criminal. "Subject Rodriguez," announced the Veltar High Counselor, whose crystal form was larger and more complex than any Amy had seen before. "You will demonstrate your species' progress in emotional control." Amy bowed respectfully. "Honored counselors, I am grateful for this opportunity to show how human subjects can benefit from council guidance." What followed was a carefully choreographed performance. Amy presented data showing declining emotional responses among human test subjects, spoke about the benefits of logical thinking, and demonstrated her own controlled reactions to emotional stimuli. But woven throughout her presentation were subtle elements designed by Dr. Webb's team. She told stories about human history that contained hidden emotional triggers. She showed images that appeared logical and scientific but contained psychological patterns designed to activate dormant neural pathways. The aliens took notes and murmured approval at Amy's apparent emotional suppression. They didn't notice the barely perceptible changes in their own behavior as the triggers began to work. A slight shift in posture here, a change in vocal tone there, micro-expressions on species that hadn't shown facial expressions in millennia. During a break in the presentation, Amy placed 3 more devices around the chamber. The aliens were so focused on discussing her performance that they paid no attention to her movements. Meanwhile, Ambassador Peter Hayes was conducting his own part of the operation in another section of the station. He had requested a formal review of humanity's protected species status, claiming that humans had evolved beyond their previous emotional limitations. "Honored Council," Hayes addressed a smaller group of alien administrators, "humanity has learned much from your guidance over the past 3 years. We believe we are ready for increased autonomy within the galactic community." The alien administrators exchanged glances. Several showed signs of the mild confusion that Webb's team had predicted would result from dormant emotional pathways beginning to activate. "This is unexpected," admitted a Zephyrian commander. "Our research suggests that emotional suppression in humans requires constant supervision." "Perhaps," Hayes replied carefully, "but consider the possibility that emotions themselves are not the problem. Perhaps the issue is learning to use emotions as tools rather than being controlled by them." The concept seemed to genuinely puzzle the aliens. They had spent millennia believing that emotions were purely destructive forces that had to be eliminated. The idea that emotions could be useful was almost incomprehensible to them. As Hayes continued his presentation, Amy was placing the final devices around the station. Each one contained not just holographic projectors and system interfaces, but also subsonic sound generators and atmospheric processors designed to trigger primal fear responses in multiple alien species simultaneously. The moment of truth came. During the evening session, when both presentations were scheduled to conclude, Amy stood before the full council, delivering what appeared to be a speech about humanity's gratitude for alien guidance. In reality, she was counting down to the moment when Webb's devices would activate. "The human species has learned so much from council wisdom," Amy said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We have discovered that emotions need not be weaknesses if they are properly understood and channeled." Several aliens in the audience shifted uncomfortably. The emotional triggers had been working on them for hours, and their dormant neural pathways were beginning to stir with unfamiliar sensations. "For example," Amy continued, "fear can motivate caution and preparation. Anger can drive determination and justice. Love can inspire sacrifice and creation. These emotions make humans stronger, not weaker." A Veltar counselor flickered with agitation. "Emotions cannot make a species stronger. They cause irrationality and conflict." "Do they?" Amy asked, then activated a hidden signal device. Throughout Nexus Prime, Webb's projectors came online simultaneously. The first sign of trouble was a shudder that ran through the entire station. Emergency lights began flashing as the station's computers reported massive system failures throughout the structure. Hull breaches were detected in 12 sections. Life support was failing. The central reactor was showing dangerous instability. But the crisis wasn't just mechanical. As the emergency unfolded, Amy began telling a story that had never been heard in the council chambers before. Once, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chaos, there was a species that faced a disaster like this. Their home was dying, their people were scattered, their future looked hopeless. But instead of giving up, they felt something that changed everything. Around the chamber, aliens were beginning to experience sensations they had no words for. Their logical minds told them to evacuate in an orderly fashion, but something deeper was awakening in their consciousness. They felt fear, Amy continued as alarms blared around them. But they also felt something else. They felt love for their families, determination to protect them, anger at the forces threatening their world. A Zephyrian commander stood up shakily, his insect-like features twitching in ways Amy had never seen before. What is happening to me? He clicked in distress. And most importantly, Amy said, raising her voice as the simulation reached its crescendo, they felt hope. Hope that tomorrow could be better than today. Hope that their children might live to see a brighter future. The aliens were beginning to panic now. But it wasn't just fear of the apparent disaster. They were experiencing the return of emotional capacity that had been dormant for millennia, and their minds had no framework for processing these new sensations. Some of the crystal Veltar began to crack under the psychological pressure. Energy beings flickered erratically. The stone creatures rumbled with sounds that might have been sobs, and in the midst of this chaos, Amy Rodriguez stood calm and controlled, demonstrating exactly the kind of emotional strength that humans had learned to cultivate over thousands of years of evolutionary pressure. This is what emotions can do, she called out over the alarms. They can save you if you let them. The real test was just beginning. The simulation had been running for 20 minutes and Nexus Prime was in complete chaos. What the aliens experienced as a catastrophic station failure was actually an elaborate holographic projection, but their terror was absolutely real. Amy Rodriguez watched in amazement as the mighty Galactic Council, representatives of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, fell apart under the weight of emotions they had never learned to handle. The Veltar High Counselor's crystal form was cracking with stress fractures. Zephyrian commanders abandoned their posts to huddle in corners, overwhelmed by primal fear. The living stone beings were making sounds that could only be described as weeping. Please, Amy called out over the chaos, her voice the only calm sound in the chamber. Let me help you understand what you're feeling. But the aliens were beyond listening. For thousands of years, they had made decisions based purely on logic and calculation. Now, suddenly flooded with emotional responses, their minds simply couldn't process the experience. Ambassador Peter Hayes appeared in the chamber doorway with a team of human technicians. While the aliens collapsed under emotional overload, the humans moved with practiced efficiency, checking systems, coordinating responses, and maintaining order. Status report, Hayes called to Amy. All devices functioning normally, she replied. The simulation is holding steady. How are they handling it in the other sections? Complete breakdown, Hayes answered grimly. The Veltar leadership is paralyzed with fear. The Zephyrians are experiencing what can only be described as panic. Attacks. 3 different species have requested immediate evacuation. Dr. Thecamar, Amy's former tormentor, crawled across the floor toward her. His crystal body was dim and fractured, his mental state clearly deteriorating. Please, he begged. Make it stop. I don't understand what's happening to me. Amy knelt beside the alien who had spent years studying her emotional responses like she was a laboratory animal. Now he was the one begging for help, overwhelmed by sensations he couldn't comprehend. You're feeling fear, she explained gently. It's an emotion designed to help you avoid danger, but you've never learned how to manage it. Fear? The crystal alien's voice was barely a whisper. This is what you experience every day? Sometimes, Amy admitted. But we also feel joy, love, excitement, curiosity. Fear is just one emotion among many. Around the chamber, other humans had appeared. Dr. Susan Walsh was helping a group of energy beings understand the anxiety they were experiencing. Captain Jake Morrison worked with alien technicians who were too overwhelmed to function properly. The humans moved through the chaos like islands of calm in an emotional storm. They had spent their entire lives learning to work with emotions instead of against them. While the aliens drowned in feelings they couldn't understand, humans used those same feelings as tools. "Watch how they respond," Amy said to Dr. Thekmar, pointing to the human team members. "Jake over there is feeling the same fear you are, but he's using it to motivate careful action. Susan is sad about seeing you all suffer, but that sadness is making her more determined to help." The crystal alien struggled to focus through his emotional overload. "How is that possible? How can you function while experiencing these sensations?" "Because we learned that emotions aren't our enemies," Amy replied. "They're part of us. Fighting them just makes them stronger. Working with them makes us stronger." Gradually, the humans began to restore order to the station, not by suppressing the aliens' newly awakened emotions, but by teaching them how to function despite feeling afraid, confused, and overwhelmed. Ambassador Hayes stood before what remained of the High Council and made an announcement that would change galactic history. "The crisis is over," he declared. "The station systems are stable. There was never any real danger." The silence that followed was deafening. Slowly, the aliens began to understand what had happened to them. "You did this," the Veltar High Counselor accused, his cracked crystal form flickering with what might have been anger. "You deliberately caused us to experience these sensations." "Yes," Hayes admitted without hesitation. "We triggered the return of emotional responses that have been dormant in your species for millennia." "But why?" demanded a Zephyrian commander still shaking from residual fear. "Why would you inflict such suffering?" Amy stood up and addressed the council directly. "Because you were about to inflict far worse suffering on us. You were planning to surgically remove human emotions, thinking you were doing us a favor. You were going to turn us into empty shells like you've become." She gestured around the chamber at the aliens who were still struggling to cope with their emotional awakening. "Look at yourselves. You've spent 3 years studying human emotions, convinced they were weaknesses. But when you experienced them yourselves, you fell apart completely." Captain Jake Morrison stepped forward. "Humans don't fall apart when we feel fear or sadness or anger. We've learned to use those feelings to make better decisions, to protect the people we care about, to create beautiful things and fight for important causes. Your species gave up the most important part of what made you alive," added Dr. Susan Walsh. "You removed your capacity for joy, love, wonder, and hope, along with fear and anger. You turned yourselves into biological computers." The aliens were beginning to recover from the initial shock, but the changes weren't temporary. Webb's devices had successfully reactivated neural pathways that had been dormant for thousands of years. The aliens would continue to experience emotions whether they wanted to or not. Dr. Thekmar looked up at Amy with something that might have been wonder in his flickering crystal eyes. "I can feel something when I look at the star patterns. On the chamber walls, they seem beautiful." "Is this what you call aesthetic appreciation?" Amy smiled. "That's exactly what it is. You're seeing beauty for the first time in thousands of years." Across the chamber, other aliens were having similar experiences. A Zephyrian commander was staring at his reflection in a polished surface, fascinated by the way his own appearance made him feel. Energy beings were exploring how their emotions changed the patterns of their flickering forms. The High Counselor struggled to maintain authority as his worldview crumbled around him. "These sensations are disruptive. They interfere with logical decision-making. They must be suppressed again." "They don't have to be," Ambassador Hayes replied. "Humans have been making logical decisions while experiencing emotions for our entire evolutionary history. The key is learning to work with emotions instead of fighting them. Will you teach us?" The question came from an unexpected source, a massive stone being who had been silent throughout the crisis. "Will you help us understand these new sensations?" Amy looked around the chamber at aliens who had spent years treating humans like dangerous animals that needed to be controlled. Now they were asking for help understanding the very thing they had tried to eliminate. "That depends," she said carefully. "Are you willing to admit that emotions aren't weaknesses? Are you ready to treat humans as equals instead of test subjects?" The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some aliens demanded that the emotional responses be suppressed again. Others argued for learning to manage them. A few suggested that perhaps their ancestors had made a mistake in removing emotions from their species. In the end, it was Captain Jake Morrison who provided the decisive argument. "You have a choice," he told the council. "You can try to go back to the empty existence you had before, where you felt nothing and understood nothing about what makes life worth living, or you can learn from us how to be complete beings again. But if you choose to go back," Amy added, "you'll do it without human cooperation. We won't be your test subjects anymore. We won't be your protected species. We'll find our own way in the galaxy." The threat was clear. Humans had just demonstrated that they understood alien psychology better than aliens understood themselves. They had shown that human emotions were strengths, not weaknesses, and they had proven that they were capable of fighting back when threatened. The final vote was close, but it passed. Humanity would be granted full membership in the Galactic Council as equals. In exchange, humans would help the other species learn to understand and manage their newly reawakened emotional responses. As the council session ended, Dr. Thekmar approached Amy one last time. "I owe you an apology," the crystal alien said, his voice still shaky with unfamiliar emotions. "For years I treated you as a test subject. I caused you pain and called it science. You didn't know any better," Amy replied. "You had no framework for understanding what pain meant or why it mattered. But I do now," Thekmar said. "And I am sorry. Is that the correct word for this feeling?" Amy smiled. "That's exactly the right word. And yes, I forgive you." As she walked away from Nexus Prime aboard the human transport ship that had come to collect her, Amy looked back at the massive station. Inside, aliens were experiencing wonder, fear, joy, and sadness for the first time in millennia. They were learning that emotions weren't obstacles to overcome, but tools to embrace. The aliens had said humans were emotionally weak. They had tried to cure humanity of feelings they saw as primitive and irrational. Instead, they had learned to feel fear, and, in learning to fear, they had begun to truly live.